All right, so next, a fireside chat with Mikhail Vardanyan, the co-founder and CEO of PixArt. Yes, yes. And Sona Mamian, Director of Growth at 10Web. They're going to talk on going global, lessons from the CEO of Armenia's first unicorn. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome.
Hello everyone. Hello Mikhail John.
Hi all.
Let's go straight to the point. What you say?
Hey all, great seeing you all.
Okay. So like I was walking down the hall to this stage and I overheard the classic pitch of Armenian startup ecosystem to one of the international guests. You know, Armenian startup ecosystem. I'm just citing. Yeah, Armenian startup ecosystem is very strong, powerful. Unicorns like PixArt were originated from Armenian startup ecosystem. So that's like a classic pitch we hear a lot of times during the year. So one might think that it was an easy journey, a straight line of success. But what's your perspective? Was it the case?
Yeah, great question. Thanks again. Hope everyone know about PixArt, so no need to introduce. In regards to success, it was already 15 years. We have been doing it. We have been doing other companies before, with also successful ones. And we learned that there is no overnight success. It just takes time, over and over, iterations, experiments, running, failing, experimenting again. It requires a lot of resilience to keep going, because we have encountered so many issues over the year, and many of those are not under control. We just need to adapt, and we just need to figure out how to address them differently and just move forward. And all these recent changes, as Rev and Alec also was talking a couple of sessions before, all these new challenges are also new opportunities for us, but at the same time it requires completely different way of playing the game. So we're still now in the process of adapting and figuring that out.
I think we're all aware of the elephant in the room in form of AI and the changes it's making. Let's leave it for a moment and let's maybe like, I was reading about the success story of Lovable, one of the startups that did this huge leap, yeah, from 0 to 75K ARR, not K, millionaire ARR in record time. And then they had this outline of story, like how it went. Can you recall some of those like moments for PixArt as well? Like what were the early bets, and then what were these key moments that that you knew that you were on the right track?
Yeah, so first of all the stories are nice when it's already post the story, post-mortem. Everything worked, you are growing, everything nice. So you're always telling nice stories and write nice stories, and you're always telling that that was as a result of us doing this. But in reality, everything is, at the end of the day, is bets. Set of bets, you just bet on some stuff, test it, it doesn't work, okay, move ahead, testing another stuff. When we started, our first bet was starting from Android marketplace, when everyone was starting from Apple Store, because of the way things working, because of course better monetization stuff, etc. So it was our first bet, which helped us with the second bet, is organic growth, which again was a result of having the right first bet during that and running and starting on Android marketplace. So second bet also played well, because we started to grow organically, and our bet was word of mouth at that time mainly, and it's still word of mouth, because like 90% of our new users currently, and those are millions, are still coming to PixArt organically, and just 5 to 10% is paid marketing. So it was second bet, okay, it works. Then we decided let's launch community because we knew that every utility tool at the end of the day will be commoditized at a certain point of time, and you need to keep doing. So that was again bad. It played well. It helped us with engagement, retention, stickiness compared to our competitors, many of competitors we have in the market. It worked. Another bet was over the years, over initial 7 years, starting and making everything free. So we were thinking, okay, let's grow the user base, then figure it out how to monetize, then starting to monetize right away. It was, again, a huge bet because we're running completely without cash flow. Everything was bootstrapped. We're very optimized in terms of costs. But it was really well because up until 2018, we were not monetizing. So for 7 years, we grown to 40 million MAU initially within the first 2 years, then to 80 million. So we started monetization when we got to 100 million monthly active users. It was again bad because everyone was using our product for free, and now we started to monetize. So we started in 2018 to monetize, and it's again, we didn't know how it will work, what will be the reaction. We lost some of the users because we made some of the features behind the paywall. But then again, it started to grow. We did from 0 in monetization to 100 in 2 years, during the first years. So and so on, and now it's time for AI, generative AI. It was 2022, right? We're actually back into the AI game in 2016, even before all of this hype. So 2022, it's another bet. Initially, it was all about foundational models. Then the next year, how to apply them. And now here we are, that foundational models mostly monopolized. So no need to invest because there are several players. And we just focused on solving users' problem by utilizing all the currently available tools, our in-house build, but also all the external available ones. Short story.
That was an awesome story. Any bets that didn't work?
Of course, I just outlined probably 10 bets which worked, and there were hundreds which didn't work. For example, growing in certain geos faster than we're imagining. Betting on China and thinking that it can continue scaling it further, but then learning that it's not only our game, it's also how good relationship you have with the government of China. So that bet worked for initial couple of years really well. Then immediately it started to go from like many millions of users, many millions of revenue, coming back to almost like 0 or thousands. So that's one of the example of the bet. Then scaling the company, where initially we were thinking, okay, we are now like 100 people, we are doing 15 things well. We will become 300 people, we will do 3 times more, 45 things. Then we do 1,200 all over the world, we'll do 1,000 things really well. It didn't work. Each time we were like scaling up, scaling down, and learning that more people is not necessarily mean more work. And in many cases, it meant for us less work. More cost, less work. So basically, that's what we learned over those years. And now, but we were always adapting really well. So now we brought the spirit back, or in the process of bringing that. And now it works back again really well.
And that was actually the next topic I wanted to delve in about how you grow the organization, people, versus how you grow the business. You touched on the geographical aspect. How do you structure your team versus your user base? Yeah, it looks like a huge user base, and an initial let's say, intuition would be to base your teams wherever your users are. But is that really the case, and how you're structuring that?
It's very tricky. Actually, there are no single answer to that. We have seen many examples having different forms of structure, and it usually changes over the years, and it's up to you to figure it out, what works good, what doesn't work for you. In our case, most of the stuff, because we are very broad, we are in most of the countries in the world, but our teams are mainly concentrated currently. The biggest team, of course, in Armenia, Yerevan. Then we have 4 locations in Europe, and then 2 locations in US at the moment. So those are the locations where everyone is working and growing all other regions and geos from. But at some point we had also people in Japan, we had people in China, we had some people in Brazil, we have so many people. It's also useful, usually starting from certain point of scalability or scaling the company, it's more preferable to have people locally on the ground, especially in order to be able to do proper localization. And when I say localization, I do not mean just translating some text from one language to another language. It's just to understand the culture, where you operate, how they behave, how they work, how they buy. So there are so many nuances which it's really hard to understand from here or from US, if you're especially operating in Asian countries. So my preference will be, again, to scale geos after a certain point of time, because you are capped if you do not know these small nuances, and you won't be able to scale and compete with the local players on the ground.
That's an interesting take. What about your growth team specifically? You mentioned that you want to have hands-on people to adapt, to localize everything to the specific markets in terms of how the market behaves and what to do in that specific market. That feels like more growth team role for me.
Yeah, growth team, of course. Overall, it's very important. If you operate globally, having knowledge how to operate in different geos is important. It's from growth perspective, from even hiring people perspective, letting go people perspective, because all the geos have its own complexities, and it's really hard to be flexible in certain cases. So that's really important from all aspects, but from growth perspective especially, that's really important, and especially when you are at scale-up stage, when you've grown, let's say we got already over 2 billion installs in our lifetime, right? So we need to figure it out how to scale it, because in many countries or in many places there is not enough people anymore, or the people we have got, now we need to think how to get new segments, and in order to get those segments, we need to understand them well enough in order to be able to approach them correctly. So that's why, from growth perspective, I prefer to have people at least in certain geos, and geos like China, Japan, those geos are very different from the rest of the world, and without having people on the ground, it's super hard to scale it.
What about R&D team? Does it matter really where the team is located?
No, in regards to R&D team, I prefer more centralized approach in many cases, and we managed to work pretty well over those 15 years, just having the biggest location here in terms of R&D, in terms of even AI and other main functions. Yes, it's good to have some diversification, so you have some smaller hubs outside and not have everything in one city, in one country from the risk perspective, but I do not see there's a need to localize R&D. It's just a matter whether you can find the talent you need or not. So of course, if you can find some talent here, you need to go abroad and find it there. If there is some specific and very niche talent, again, you need to find in the places where it's available. But other than that, I do not see there is a need to diversify that.
Speaking of engineering, you yourself have engineering background, correct? And you had an interesting evolution of your role, how you started engineering product and then now growth and operations. Would you please like open the brackets here, like how each of these roles was a base for you for what you are currently doing? Is that really like important for your company, or is that can be like anything? Because like delving into the structure of the growth teams and the growth professionals is like it can be anything, yeah, from product, from marketing, from engineering. Like there are all sorts of folks. So wanted to like hear about your personal history.
Thanks. So first of all, in startup world, there is no difference. What is your background if you are doing startup? If you are starting and scaling company, you are doing everything. So you should become expert in everything, initially at least. And that's why in our case, we all were doing everything. That's one thing. Second, engineering background, I do believe it's important. Because I've seen many times people converting easily with engineering background to becoming good marketers, to becoming good business people, to becoming good growth people. But I have seen very few examples vice versa. So basically, if you have that background, it helps you a lot to analyze data, to understand data, to bring and put the dots together. Of course, it's not applied to everyone, but in most of the cases, it's much easier and smooth journey towards to becoming expert in other areas than, let's say, starting from a marketing as a main discipline and then trying to do many other things. That's what we learned over those years, and that's also got us to the point when we understood we were hiring some good growth people. We were saying bye to them, those good growth people, and then eventually we learned that those are certain areas which you need to do yourself because no other can come and do that better than you. And even the people who did or shown on the LinkedIn they did it, they just were part of the journey in most of the cases. They knew that everything working, if everything working, it's easy to tell the nice story and say that's what I did. But eventually starting and doing it from scratch is completely different. So most of the people in the market are maintainers, how I call them, and not the builders. And finding really good builders is not an easy job because they either build their own stuff or they are part of already a huge thing. So that's why it takes a lot of time and effort, and usually it's super hard to find. So that's why now I'm focusing on growth, marketing, monetization, and all what relates to this.
When I was hired to Tenweb, Ardo told me that he's looking for people that are failing their businesses and then offering to join the company. That looks like very...
yeah, we are looking at that as well, by the way. We have a couple of people here, so that's how we're also hiring.
Okay, so not every failure is a failure, guys.
Failing company is a good thing, guys, because that means that you are a risk taker, you try to do something, you are proactive, you have self-manageability, so there are many criteria which helps when you're failing something, because in other cases it's really hard to demand from someone who never tried doing anything to be super proactive, and it usually ends up being in a babysitting mode.
Yeah, and I know that you're known for your optimistic views and very high bar when it comes to risk tolerance. What would you like comment about that? Is that really the case, or is that just human?
Yes, some people can confirm here, and I wouldn't be probably here if I wouldn't have that optimism, by the way, because it helps a lot, and you know, like it's, as I mentioned, there are 10,000 challenges every day. You just need to look optimistically, figure it out, whether you can find some opportunities within those, and just try to do something. Because it's really easy to find 10,000 reasons or things why something won't work. It's the easiest thing. I can find everything about that in a minute. But it's really hard to find something which will work and focus and make it working. So that's where you need optimism, because at the end of the day, not everything will work, but you need to be optimistic and positive, thinking that, okay, I tried this, it didn't work, that's fine, but let's do it in a different way, or let's try to do something else, then it may work. So it helps a lot, and I believe it helps a lot to some people who are around me. But I also learned not to be overly optimistic over those years. That's also important. No extremes.
So when you go for high risk, high success cases, it's all about how you structure your whole portfolio, right, of the actions that you're taking. Like you need to go for the quantity as well. If you're like taking a lot of risks, you need to make sure that there are enough actions that you're making so that overall you can structure it in a way that at least one of them, if that shoots, then you're succeeding. Like that's the mindset I'm getting that you have. And then like if that's really the case, how do you manage to like balance and not overdo it?
Yeah, what I learned over those years and what we learned is it's all about experimentation. Everything is a bet. No one can say for sure that something will work unless you did it maybe 10 times, it worked 10 times, but I've never seen anyone who did it that way. So it's all about experimentation, number of experiments, and just keep doing in many cases, then figuring out. I'm less into planning, strategy, and all these things, especially nowadays when you can have nice strategy today, which will be already obsolete tomorrow, or the next day, because everyone is moving so fast. There is even no time for planning or strategy. You just need to keep doing. And I've also have some advisors and board members, then some of them are also telling it's better to do many things without planning, because at the end of the day something will work. Then having super plan, but neither of your stuff in the plan will work because you are usually late, everything delayed, you are spending too much time on meetings, discussions, etc. And it's super, super important right now because there is almost no time. You are seeing right every day there are 10 new models which are released every day. The game of growth is changing. Yesterday it was all about SEO. Today is everything about generative engine optimization. So immediately within a couple of months, the whole game of growth, which was built this last 25 years, changed. So you need to adjust, and here is a good chance for the ones who were a bit late in the SEO game, but maybe you can be fast and first in the GEO game. So that's why you need to be fast here, otherwise there are many other companies which are moving super fast. The same is Lovable story, by the way. It's easy to grow up until a certain scale, but it's super hard to keep scaling and sustaining that growth, I will tell you. That's why do not be so excited with with these companies who are doing 0 to 20 million in 1 month, in 2 months, they will stuck at some point, and then they will need to think how to build sustainable business versus just this trendy stuff, doing something and growing, but then do not know how to continue building it.
Exactly. Acquisition is the start of the story. Yeah? You need to have an understanding of how many of those paying users are actually staying with the company. And talking about the experimentation, can you do this like, I don't know how many you can, 10 experiments you did in last 2 months or something like that? So that like the feeling of the need
No,
for
we are
quantity.
doing around 300 experiments per quarter. In most of the cases, again, how you define experiment. We're running many experiments, the same experiment in different countries. We do not consider it as like 10 experiments, because at the end of the day, it's just one experiment, just with different segments. But usually, in general, we try to do more than 1,000 and even do more per year. So on average, it's like 200, 300 per quarter, what we are currently doing. And that was also one of the bets that we did many years ago, start to build our own experimentation engine, analytics, and spend a lot of money, time, and efforts to do this. And it's now pays off because it's another area which you can outpace your competitors if you have a certain good experimentation machine, because again, growth is a game of experimentation.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask as well, because doing so many experiments, it requires like not only ideation, but also backing data, yeah? So you have built your own experimentation platform, is that correct? Would you like open the brackets a little bit on what that looks like and how you're using and how the team is using that?
We have a platform which our team was building for the last 10 years. It's basically about analytics platform on the one hand, so all our data is stored there, all our analysis are being done by utilizing this data, and then on top of that, we also have built our own experimentation engine, A/B tool, how we call it, to do and run different tests in different geos with different segments of users. So when we keep refining and building it further, because you know there are many complexities, right? How to distribute people within experiments, how to calculate the stuff, how to look at numbers, etc., how to find some correlations. And at the end of the day, our goal, and we are coming closer to make it the way so there is no need for data scientists to spend time and efforts on the simple stuff, but just focus on the more complex stuff, while our tool is helping everyone, our product managers, our designers, everyone in the company to use it as a self-service tool, and eventually, potentially also selling it as a part of our PicsArt platform workflow.
That's good. And do you manage to stay in that motion? I mean, like, what does currently your experimentation portfolio look like in terms of like, there are big bets, yeah, moonshots, and then like small ones, like how do you structure those? And then with these changes, let's like pass to that elephant in the room that we promised in the beginning, yeah, of the session. Like, how does that impact? Like, do you still find yourself being able to stay in that experiment, grow, keep the loops up kind of situation? Or do you find yourself like back into the finding this product market fit, refining product market fit situation more often?
No, we separate it. We have two parts of the company. One part of the company is mainly focuses on scaling whatever is already working, scaling, refining, improving, where we see there's still capacity and we can grow. So that's one area. It's most of like 85% of the company and efforts and experiments. And then we have another team which focused on those big bets on future mainly, where there's still a need for product market fit, where there's still a need to talk to users, to understand the needs, to solve the problems. There is less experimentation, there is more learnings. How to say, it's more like demos, learnings, user tests in terms of that. So that area is just focused on finding those new bets. But we also learned we shouldn't mix those two, because both are not working. Whatever is working starting to go slow, and whatever you think will work, and there's again, it's 50-50, right? Or maybe 51-49 that it will work. If it won't work, then you are losing both of those things, and you are now in the trouble. So that's why we learned we need to separate those, we need to properly balance those two, and the person who is focusing on scaling shouldn't be thinking of the future new bets, and vice versa in most of the cases.
And would you mind like bringing examples from both directions so that it's more shaped on what you're talking about for the audience?
Last example, because I believe we are running out of time. So, for example, our initial feature set, like we had AI filters, our retouch tools, our remove background, and all those tools. Those are the examples where we keep scaling. They are working. We know that everyone needs them. We know that the market is still huge. We keep pushing them. On the other side, we now mostly for future in this agentic world. So we now focused on building workflows, design workflows, but also not only design, but let's say performance marketing workflow, which includes some design elements, but at the same time some complementary tools and products as well. That's what we call our Pixart Flow product. Then we are also focusing on the text-based only product that will help you to do the same stuff you're currently being able to do on our platform via different prompts and via writing text, and maybe also in future some voice methods. So those are the examples of the things which we work. We believe they will be our next, but they are just in terms of market and in terms of our revenue and growth, they are still this initial ramping up phase.
Thank you very much for the conversation. We were hinted that the time
Yeah,
is...
thank you also.
unfortunately.
Thank you for great questions. If anyone have any suggestions or any questions, I always always ready to help you guys. Great to see those people coming more and more to all those events. We have been here for many years, and at some point we had here like 3-4 companies at the same time presenting different products, and it was great to see how it was evolving, and also those conferences which were part of the recent years Digitech. So thank you all. Keep building. Do not overthink the stuff and be optimists.
Thank you very much.